Hello, everyone, and welcome to our panel, and welcome to the virtual Bay Area Book Artists 2020 Jam. This is a panel called Book Club for Book Artists, and there are a number of us here, and we are planning to present some recommendations to you. We will each introduce ourselves when our section comes up, and we're extremely pleased to have you here today. We welcome you to explore our website, bayareabookartist.org. And if you find that you'd like to share any thoughts about this panel or anything that you find on our site, please get our attention using the hashtag BabaJam2020. And we look forward to speaking with you live on October 18th. And you can see the full schedule of the speakers on our website and will be available for Q&A. If you'd like to find any of the books that we talk about during this presentation, you can visit this website, and we'll have links to how you can explore online or acquire any of these if you'd like to add them to your own reading list. So first up, off to you, INSIYA.
Hi, I'm INSIYA DHATT. Been a member of FABA since 2017, fairly new to the book art world. So my two choices are not directly related, but are sort of the foundation of books for me. So the first one is Forms of Paper by Ogawa. And what that book did for me was introduce me into the world of paper and how a piece of blank paper can become a sculptural art element. And it's one of the first books that actually had a practical side as well as a beautiful look and feel. So if you look at on some of the pages, he shows you how to do these sculptures, but he also has the templates for them or how to cut them. A lot of his work has now become furniture design and has been used in lighting, and some of it is solar panels. So it's a very interesting, the book is not available. I actually got a hold of it from the library, and I bought the library copy. That's a go-to place for me. My second is to kind of talk about the history of India in the way of storytelling. So for me as a child, for all of us actually, book is the first form that we start to learn about stories and about making up fantasies and dreams and all the things that kind of start to make sense to us. The Panchatantra is an ancient Indian collection of interrelated animal fables that the original author is not known. It was around 200 BCE that there are lots of monuments and things like that that are built around it. But essentially, it's one of the oldest forms of storytelling that has been adapted in over 50 languages. And some say that it is part of Arabian Nights, and Sinbad has been inspiration from the Panchatantra. Some say that the Canterbury Tales by Chaucer have been, the Panchatantra has been sort of a influence. So I just wanted to bring that to people's attention. And there are many, many translations. So the link will be available if you want to have an English translation. This is one of the ones that is sort of the authority author writer. So that's my list.
Hi, my name's Karen Rush. I'm a printmaker, bookmaker, and paper maker. And my choices are all the way from sort of inspirational to more practical. This is one of the first books I chose when I started doing natural dyeing and eco-printing on books. It's a wonderful, simple, well laid out book that gives you all what you need to do to start the process and the materials you need to use to create the plants that you can use. And then it gives you all the color references that you get from the natural materials that you have made into dye. This is a layout. You can see here the information on the plants, and then every color that you can achieve with different mordants. So it's incredibly, it's the best place to go, I found, to begin your sort of search into natural dyes. And my second choice is Landscape and Ideology by Anne Birmingham. And one of the things that I'm really interested in is landscapes and its ability to hold memory and meaning. And Anne Birmingham explores that in the British tradition of landscape. And she goes all the way from Gainsborough through Turner and Constable into later Victorian artists. And the belief is then Stitch Magic by Jan Beanie and Jean Littlejohn is incredibly inspirational. The images are just gorgeous, and it's sort of a non-traditional look at stitching and all the possibilities it can open up. So there's a how-to of sort of the basic little stitches, but then they go into what you can do with those stitches, how you can change them up, the different types of materials you can use, non-traditional materials, and also how you can find inspiration and translate that into stitching. This is bark, and she shows some different ways of sort of interpreting what you're seeing and how it can be translated into stitching. And my go-to book, sometimes when I'm working on a book, whether it's at the beginning or maybe I'm sort of already in the creative process, is making handmade books. And the diagrams are very, very clear in the instructions, but she also shows you what you can do and to change it up. So she'll give you slightly different versions. This is Jacob's Ladder, but she also does traditional codexes and gives you different varieties of books that you can do within one sort of main idea. Okay.
Hi, I'm Astrid, and I've been a member of BABA since 2008. And the first book that I chose is called People of the Book by Geraldine Brooks. And Geraldine Brooks is an Australian writer. This book is one of her historical fiction novels, and it's extremely well researched. It traces the journey of the centuries-old Hebrew illuminated manuscript known as the Sarajevo Haggadah, and from its creation and until its analysis and conservation by a modern conservator named Hannah. And the codex was made around 1350 in Spain. And some of the parts of the book that really stood out to me were the descriptions of the artist doing the illuminations, including some of the tools that she used, like a little cat whisker brush for some of the tiny details, and the transport of the book during World War II, keeping it safe and preserving it so that it's still around today. I listened to this book on Audible, and I found the narration really, really transported me to the visuals of seeing how this book traveled through time, and I could just put myself in the perspective of the conservator performing the work as well. Absolutely highly recommend. I've already had a couple of friends read it, and it's a fabulous read. The second book is much more technical. This book is by the writer, teacher, and artist Keith Smith, and it's part of a 3-part series on non-adhesive binding, books without paste or glue. It's very technical. Keith is a very prolific writer, and many of these are very complex, but if you're someone who likes sewing or knitting, when you start to understand the language of how they work and the abbreviations and the way the diagrams work, it really opens up an entire world of possibilities, because you can start to pair the techniques with the intention of the book that you're making, so that the way that it's structurally held together can become part of the meaning of your overall creation, rather than sort of the meaning and then thinking about how you're going to hold it together. So I would absolutely recommend this, and you can get it from his website, his own website. And when I did purchase it, which was quite a while ago now, he wrote a handwritten note. So absolutely visit his site.
Hi, I'm Bridget WHEARTY. I'm a professor of English and Medieval Studies in Binghamton University, which is in upstate New York and is part of the larger State University of New York system. I study medieval manuscripts and literature, and I also study the digitization of medieval manuscripts, which is how I was lucky enough to meet Astrid, and what kind of brings me here today. My first book is called Scriptorium Poems, and it's a modern poetry book by a woman named Melissa Range, and it won this 2015 poetry series, and it's incredibly beautiful, kind of weaving together two stories. One is poetry about growing up in rural Tennessee and Melissa Range's own life, and the other is a series of poems about medieval monks and bookmakers making pigments and making books. And so I want to actually read the first poem in the book to all of you, because I think it's just incredible. Yeah, there we go. Not green as new weeds or crushed juniper, but a toxic and unearthly green, meet for inking angel wings, made from copper sheets, treated with vapors of wine or vinegar, left to oxidize for the calligrapher. When it's done, he'll cover calfskin with a fleet of knotted beasts in caustic green that eats the page and grieves the paleographer. There's copper in my brain, my heart of hearts, in my blood, an essential mineral. Too much is poison. Too much air imparts sickness to the script. Once begun, eternal, its words forever grass in drought, nor departs my grief, green and corrosive as a gospel. And I just love how learned this poetry is, how she's thinking about the chemical composition of pigments, of how many people would make, of how the pigment ages over time, of what it looks like in manuscripts. But she's doing it in a way that is so vibrant and artistic and new. And that's one of the things that I just love about this book of poetry, the way that she makes these really old, learned things vibrant and alive and super, super exciting. She also has poems about medieval books. So the next slide is an image of the actual gospel book of Otto III, which was made in the 10th century, so the 900s. And then she's written this amazing poem about how gold leaf was made, how it's applied to a book, how gold can function to make a king seem even more powerful, what it's like to sort of have this tension between real and poverty and religion. And it's just all incredibly, incredibly lovely. And then the final poem in the book is where the book gets its name, and it's called Scriptorium. And it's about the making of the Lindisfarne Gospels, which are a real medieval book that I've given you an image of on the slide also. And it actually connects really nicely with what Karen is talking about with wild colors and going and finding the materials to make pigment, because it tells the story of the scribe going out and gathering materials. This really gorgeous, and I really recommend you all go read it. But I want to draw your attention just to the final kind of bit of stanza 4 here, where she writes about the earth and not the cell being his scriptorium, where he might see the interlace of branch and twig and leaf. And I just think it's such an exciting way to think about nature and books and art, and really old books and really new art all working together. And the second book is actually a real medieval manuscript that I've worked with on my own in the museum, but that I was also lucky enough to go and attend its digitization. So I got to watch all of the people who work behind the scenes, who do all of the labor that makes it possible for these books to be used and visible. And that was incredibly exciting for me. This book is bigger than my laptop. Actually, it's enormous. It was copied by a single scribe whose name we actually know, which is incredibly rare for medieval manuscripts, although we don't actually know who he made this book for. And one of the reasons I was really excited to bring it to all of you today is that it's just absolutely beautiful in terms of inspiration. There are, if we go to the next slide, there are these beautiful images. This is what one of the pages looks like. And if you zoom in on some of the details, you can see the kind of signature work that Ricardus Franciscus does to sign his work. And he does these like really elaborate ascenders with all of these little scrolls that he sometimes writes tiny mottos on. It's just sort of sumptuous and rich and completely over the top in the best possible ways. And then there are all of these other details that layer in too. So we see what the original medieval bookmaker made. But if we go to the next slide, we can also see what the decorators of the manuscript made, and all of their work, these beautiful letters, these wonderful golden blue swoops. You can see that this later reader has come in over the top and written nota, which means pay attention to this, completely over all of that hard work that that book artist had put in before. And I these so lucky to get to look at them, to get to work with them. I also am so moved that they're available online. And they're available online for free download and reuse. And if we kind of go to the next slide, you can sort of see the materiality, the spots, the splotchiness, the way that this has aged over 500 years. And this is also the opening of the poem, where the poet writes about what it's like to take a thing from the past and make it for a new audience. If we go to the next slide, I've given you a couple of lines from it. And he's writing about artists can take these old things and shape them into new forms and make them and unmake them and break them and renew them to be accessible and exciting for new generations and new people. And that's why I'm so excited to share it with all of you today, because as much as these books exist to inspire my research and my teaching, they really exist even more to inspire new people who can come up with things that I would never think to do. And so it's my dream, and I know some of the dreams of some of the people who helped make this particular digital book, that artists like you see them and are inspired by them and want to break and renew some vessels yourself, and use these to sort of push your own expression further.
Great, Bridget, thank you. Hello, I'm Patience Young. I'm retired from the Cantor Art Center at Stanford, where I was the curator for education and the director of academic engagement there. So I'm an art historian, a museum education specialist, and some other things. And I'm bringing to your attention today 3 books that are all chestnuts. They're not recent publications, but they're enduring. And I go back to them again and again and recommend them to people. And I think you will enjoy them as well. The first, The Barnum Museum. My copy is so old that the cover looks quite different than this one. Some of you may know Stephen Millhauser, whose fiction borders on the realm that we live in and other realms that are just beyond the veil and beyond the pale. And he is dealing with magical, mystical, not overtly mystical, but very strange environments. And the short story, The Barnum Museum, in this larger volume, is not a story with a narrative, but a story about a rather magical, unlikely, and impossible museum. A museum that keeps unfolding in new ways for the visitor. And the story is written in short segments. There are 25 segments, I think. Number 19 is my favorite, which is about the researchers that are upstairs, unseen, unheard. Their books, we don't know where they go to, but what they are doing is important. And as a museum professional, I could identify with the satire of that. The Barnum Museum is a delightful read. It will take you into the realm of collecting and displaying and spectacle and impossible realities, but I recommend it highly. The second book is Forgotten Arts and Crafts. Again, not a new publication, and also not a scholarly one, a very down-to-earth, written by someone who grew up on a farm, had lots of different down-to-earth experiences. He speaks with familiarity about all types of tools and all types of pre-industrial and early industrial devices for survival in households and in the country and on sea, and very nicely illustrated. He's also not a methodical writer. He's a little all over the place, and it's a delightful thing to just open up and read anywhere. It's about drywall construction, and the 4-page spread that this is from was particularly valuable to me when Andy Goldsworthy was at Stanford and building a dry stone wall, and to know how these walls without masonry are constructed, and that the English masons who he brought with him to construct this in California have a particular skill that is age old. So it's a delightful book to read. Yesterday I was reading about tatting and crochet and learned a lot about that. Not how to do it, but a lot about the tools and the ways of the people who did these kinds of crafts. And the third book is Hans Hofmann. And here's where we'll have the diagram. And Hans Hofmann was one of the original generation of abstract expressionists. This essay dates to the late 1940s. He wrote it for his students. He came from Germany and taught for many years at UC Berkeley, and gave a good part of his collection to the museum in Berkeley, so it can be seen there. But Hofmann was, there we go, this short essay, and it's very short, Search for the Real, is a perfect introduction for someone into not only abstraction, but the mind of how the artist works and what the artist is working with. And as this diagram, which is in an appendix in the book, explains, that the artist is working from nature, getting inspiration from it, applying to it his own empathy and his own vision, and producing from that the creation, which has its own qualities as well. So it's an ideal little essay to give you the vocabulary to start talking with people about paintings, and to be thinking about, in deeper sense, about what a painting is, how it comes about, how it can mean things for you, and how it's beyond the surface of the painting. So those are my three.
Thank you everyone so much for your selections. I want to read all of them. And if you also, our audience, are inspired to read all of these, please visit the link and find some of these for your own collection. And I really want to thank all of the panelists for joining and taking time out of your Sunday today for our pre-recording for all of our audience members, but also for the live Q&A on the 18th, which we invite you to attend if you would like to ask any of us questions, or if you want to hear more about these books, we would be happy to share with you. What will happen is I'll play the recording that we just created, and then we'll have about 10 or so minutes of live question and answer time from you. And you can also use the hashtag BabaJam2020 if you want to send any of us questions ahead of time. And please do have a look around the website. There's some beautiful work, and hopefully you're inspired to try out some of our classes and make something for yourself, because that's really what our group is all about. Thank you, everyone.